and welcome to this week's episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, as per usual, a big thank you to everyone that watched last week's episode of the show, commented and gave it a thumbs up and all that kind of stuff. So, yep, really appreciated. Thank you. This week's episode of the show is kind of a sort of a continuation of last week, insofar that the theme is new distilleries, or relatively new distilleries, and so today I'm taking a look at a distillery on this side of the pond rather than in America. This is a distillery that's actually based in London, which is really nice. Nice to see distilling, whiskey distilling, taking place in the capital city. And so the distillery is called Bimber. Bit of an odd name, you might think, and probably unless you live in this country you may well never have heard of them, but they came to my attention 2016-ish, around then, and they were doing the usual, producing vodka and flavoured vodkas and things like that, and you know, the spirit was good. I thought the products were good. I just wasn't really in the market for vodka, to be honest with you. I mean, vodka sales, I guess, had started to sort of like fall off a cliff at that point in time, as that was the sort of beginning of the gin craze, which thankfully seems to be sort of running its course now, which is nice. So we can get on and talk about other spirits than gin. So basically I didn't really sort of pursue anything, and it wasn't until sort of a year or so ago that I discovered that they were actually distilling a whiskey. Then I got kind of interested, and fortunately the distillery was at the Nottingham Whiskey Festival, so I managed to collar one of the reps. Don't know the guy's name because I didn't really have much time, but we were all kind of clearing up, and I just basically said, look, can you just send me some samples, and you know, I'm really interested in trying them, and you know, seeing where you're at. And lo and behold, they did indeed kindly send me these samples. Now this is actually commercially available, and this is really nice. And before I obviously tell you exactly what's in them, you can indeed buy this set, and it comes in a lovely little box, and you get sort of you know, all, you probably can't quite make it out, but you get sort of all the information about each of the miniatures that you get in there. And I have got a couple of them left in stock. I did buy some of these. They're priced at £27.95, and if you fancy one, just sort of either message me or, you know, email me at the work email address, and I might even chuck in free delivery, as it's slow January. Anyway, so yes, it's commercially available, and right. Well, before we talk about what's actually in these glasses in front of me, let's talk a little bit about the distillery. So now the distillery, like I said, founded in 2015 by right, I'm not going to pronounce this chap's surname because he's Polish, and I'm probably going to get it completely wrong, so we'll just call him Darius. That is actually his proper name. I hasten to add, I haven't just made that one up. So apparently he came from Poland, usual sort of distilling in the family, all that kind of stuff. And the name Bimber, which you might think is a bit odd for the name of an English distiller, is actually Polish, I think, for moonshine. And well, why not? You know, it's always nice to sort of, you know, keep the heritage going, I suppose. And it seems to me that they're just doing everything correctly. I mean, so you start off with the malt. The malt is or should we say the barley, even before we get to the malt stage, the barley is sourced from Fordham and Allen in Hampshire. It's Concerto. I don't know whether it's organic or not. It may well be, to be honest with you. I mean, it just seems like that they're taking an awful lot of care and attention over practically everything that they're doing. It's then malted apparently at Britain's oldest maltings, Warminster. I don't actually know them. I believe it's floor malted as well, which is sort of you know, again, labour intensive, going to cost more, you know, and I'm guessing that sort of, you know, produces you know, maybe a better end product than using sort of like, you know, machine. Who knows? So Right, so we've got the raw materials, and you know, and like I said, they're sourcing sort of what appears to be sort of really good quality raw materials, and so you're not going to sort of do anything sort of, you're going to do the right thing, you're going to carry on doing that, and it's exactly what they do. So they've kind of set out their stall with regards to the style of spirit that they're going to make at the fermentation stage. Now obviously there's a commercial angle to this, you know, like for example the Glasgow distillery and some of the other newer distilleries. They've opted for a lighter, fruitier, estery style of spirit, which one imagines is going to be approachable a lot earlier than say something like Mortlach or Dalwhinnie. You know, if you're making a heavy sulphurous spirit, the worm tubs, etc., etc., then you know, which you ain't going to bottle that at 2 or 3 years old. Well, you might do, but you know, no one's going to enjoy it. So fermentation stage is pretty long in actual fact, at 144 hours, and as we know, you know, if you want to keep your kind of barley, gristy kind of character, you'll opt for a 48-50 hour fermentation. Kick it up to sort of double that, you're getting into the realms of the estery notes. Push it a little bit further beyond that, and you're getting into the lactones and the sort of the milkiness. And of course, you know, as we well know, that's only a real rough guide. I mean, it generally holds true, but then of course, you know, you have distilleries like Glencadam that throw everything on its head. You know, their fermentation is ridiculously short, or relatively short I should say, yet they're more concerned about the speed and the temperature of the fermentation to eke out those estery notes that they're well known for. So like I said, they're setting out their stall with regards to the style of malt that they're looking to create. And you would have thought, now I mean, you know, because the distillery was set up initially to distill gin and vodka, if you look at the two stills, one is which is 1,000 litre and called Doris apparently. I mean, what is it with you gin distillers, you know, and your fetish for naming your stills? I don't understand it, but apparently Doris is a Greek sea nymph, apparently from Greek mythology. No, that's pretty cool. Got no issue with that. And the second still is a slightly smaller 600 litre still called Astrea, which is the Greek goddess of innocence and purity. Okay, fine, I can kind of live with that. Anyway, the interesting thing about the stills is that they are, or appear to me, well, they are obviously gin stills. They're apparently made by Hoga in Portugal, and I've seen the same still in the Lincoln Gin Distillery, I believe, and it's a really cool shape. I mean, I love it. It's got like a sort of little hat on, you know. It's like, and so you think, well, okay, so that's a gin still. You can see that. Is that really going to sort of be the type of still you want to use for distilling whiskey? I mean, it's a really short. It's a fat, dumpy little still. There's no real neck to it. Yeah, I mean, all right. It's got a fairly long, fairly thin linarm, which is probably going to give you, I would guess, a relative amount of reflux. Yes, you've got the big tin hat. Again, I suppose that's like having a bit of a boil ball, possibly. So yes, maybe, but you've got no neck, you know, and no matter how slowly you distill, surely you're going to get quite a heavy spirit. Possibly, obviously not. Well, obviously, I say obviously not because I've tasted the New Make and I know it's not. So it's obviously, so what they're doing kind of works, you know, can't argue with that one. So it goes to show that not necessarily, you don't need sort of ridiculously tall necks and all that kind of stuff. You can get away with, and as we well know from the sort of the wonderful variety of shapes of stills in Scotland, that is indeed, you know, indeed true. So as long as you're getting sort of plenty of reflux somehow or other, and I'm guessing that still obviously generates that level of reflux, then you're doing all right. So basically, yeah, so the double distilled in these two stills, post distillation I'm guessing they take probably an average kind of cut, you know, coming off at 72 ABV, no sort of really narrow cuts or anything like that. And then it's reduced to 63.5 before being put in the cask, so hence the New Make spirit is 63.5. They've currently got over 350 casks, and I believe they're on track to do around about 720 casks annually by this year. And another really interesting thing, again, like I said, you know, so they've taken the time to you know, get the best barley they could, malting correctly, long fermentation, you know, double distillation, short distillation. You're not going to muck it up with your casks, and indeed they don't. And this is probably, to me, the most intriguing and interesting part of what they're doing, insofar that all the casks they source, whether they are ex-port, sherry, ex-Bourbon, all are shipped intact, they're whole, and they're shipped with juice in them. I believe, can't remember the exact amount, I think I read something like 5 litres or something like that. So basically they're shipped with transport alcohol in, so doesn't necessitate the need for sulphur cleansing and all this kind of stuff, you know. And it's seems to me a kind of almost a thing with English distilleries, because we have, you know, the St George's distillery in Norfolk, you know, seasoning their own casks, their own sherry casks. You know, they basically, you know, so again eliminating any need for cleansing and the possible taint from that cleansing process. So absolutely everything is being done, as far as I can see, to the highest specification and quality. And like I said, you know, that to me is just sort of the icing on the cake. You know, they don't want to sort of spend all this time producing a lovely, great quality spirit just to fill it into manky old casks. You know, I mean, just defeats the whole object. So they don't. Brilliant. Anyway, so if you want to find out more information about the distillery, obviously they have a pretty good website and lots of information on said website, and I think that's probably enough waffling. Let's have a look at what I've got in front of me. Like I said, they're obviously they're filling into a number of different types of casks, and they've released this little set to give you an insight. And I mean, this was really cool. I mean, you know, you get the New Make, so New Make at 63.5%. And you know, how many distilleries do you know that are going to do that for you? So here you've got your base, your marker, your base point, and then you've got all these other different cask types that they use. So we have ex-Bourbon. This is currently 57.2%. I'm guessing that these, considering the whiskey production didn't start until 2016, these are all under 3 years. Well, obviously the New Make's under 3 years of age. New Make, by the way, is batch 145. All the others are batch number 1, so I'm guessing distilled in 2016. So they're probably on the cusp of 3 years old. The second one that we'll be looking at is the only one that they've actually released in 70 cl bottles. So if you see the picture that I've used, that I've created for the title page, it kind of started off with the one and only one that they've released from this little range. And then I just sort of like mucked about with the colours to sort of make them look a little bit different. So as of this date, they have released an inaugural bottling, which I believe was relatively expensive, and they've released this one, which is the Re-Charred American oak casks. So bottled at what's it bottled at 51.9, or currently 51.9. Don't know whether the full size bottle is bottled at that or not, but I would guess probably it is. Number 3 we'll be looking at is the ex-Virgin oak. Now apparently the Virgin oak casks are charred to come from World Cooperage in Missouri. All the other casks, I believe, are charred to number 3 char, so moderately charred. And yeah, so this is the virgin oak, which is 53.1 currently. And as you can see, lovely range of colours, it has to be said. The next one we'll be looking at is the ex-sherry cask. This is again batch number 1 at 51.9%. And finally we'll be looking at the peated finish bottling. So what I'm guessing from this is that they don't actually use peated malt. They don't do a peated malt run. That they probably age or finish this in ex-peated casks, which, you know, is something that quite a number of distilleries are doing at the moment. Certainly Penderyn have been doing it for donkey's years, and Pulteney, for example, are doing it. So it's nothing particularly new, and of course, obviously, it allows them to create a peated bottling without having to go to the lengths of doing an actual peated run and then cleaning out the system and all this kind of stuff. Although maybe they will do it at some time, I have absolutely no idea. But for now, they're just doing this particular bottling, or will release this particular bottling at some stage, I guess. So this is going to be really fascinating. Really looking forward to trying the new make, getting a grip to the spirit character, and just seeing how far along these are progressing in the different cask types. So let's kick off with a bit of new make. Right, okay, so let's start with the new make. So 63.5%. Let's see what the nose gives us. It's quite rich in actual fact. It's quite oily. It's not quite as estery as I was expecting. There is a latent esteriness. There's a touch of pineapple and apricot. There's a bit of rose petal, obviously, but not really marry rose petal. It's slightly sweet rose petal, and it's got an almost kind of bready, doughy kind of note to it as well. A little bit of tea leaf as well. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderfully clean. It's got a nice kind of weight, a nice feel to it. It's not particularly sulphury, and like I said, they're obviously aiming for a spirit that's going to mature relatively quickly. But it seems to have some density and some guts to it. It's not too airy and too light that it's not going to, you know, spend some time in the cask. No, so let's see what the power's like. Quite sweet, quite barleyed. Lovely length for new make. I mean, that's got a lovely length to start off with. Touch of off the still notes, obviously. A little bit of rose petal. But all that has some lovely barleyed character. It's got a lovely purity, but again, a nice weight to it. But we're not talking sulphury kind of dense, cabbagey kind of weightiness. We're talking sort of, you know, barley weight, and I think that's really very, very nice. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Yeah, it's still pretty fruity, straight down the line. A little, it's a slight acerbic, sort of citric-ish kind of note coming out now, but essentially it's pretty much the same, and I wouldn't have expected it to change very much, because although it had a nice weight and oiliness, it's not like overly oily and you were suddenly going to put a little drop of water with it and it miraculously changes. Let's see what the power's like now. And again, hasn't changed a huge amount. Still quite barleyed, fruity, a little bit more citrus now, I suppose. Less of the rose petal, less of the off the stilly notes, although they're still just there right in the background just to say this is New Make spirit. But again, you can see that being pretty much in a drinkable position, one would imagine, within sort of like 3 to sort of 5 years, quite comfortably, one would have thought. It just doesn't have too much in the way of impurities, so the oak isn't going to have to do so much filtering and so much hard work. So lovely start. Right, okay, so let's move on to the ex-Bourbon batch. So this is 57.2%. Quite creamy, a lot of oak, almond, rye-like spice, subtle toastiness, but I'm certainly getting barley. I'm getting a little bit of rose petal. It's a little bit oak-centric at this moment in time, and the oak is starting to become a lot more creamy, a lot more noticeable, and it does seem to be sort of pushing the spirit down. So not really quite. It hasn't quite found its equilibrium yet, I think. It's obvious that the oak has added an awful lot of character to the spirit, and as yet the spirit hasn't kind of come back. So yeah, really interesting, and wonderfully clean as well. Absolutely no off notes. I mean, you know, I'm sure there are people that would love this as it is at this moment in time. See what the palate's like. Like the nose, it's very oak dominated, so I'm getting toffee, cream, pecan, peanut, creamy rye-like spices. But in saying that, right on the end, I'm starting to get the kind of barley coming through, a little bit of citrus, and having obviously tasted the New Make, I can see some of that just in the background, and it's got a nice length. I mean, you know, you could drink that now quite comfortably, but I think that realistically, I think that's going to need a little bit more time, just to kind of like, you know, see if the spirit will kind of, you know, find an equilibrium with the oak. So let's put a little drop of water with it and see what happens. Now, like a lot of whiskies, you put a little drop of water with it, and it does have a tendency to suppress the oak a bit, and it's certainly done that now. So I'm guessing that if they wanted to basically bottle this sooner rather than later, then you would be looking at bottling this at about, I mean, I know that was just a drop of water, but I would guess you don't want to bottle this at Cask. Well, I don't know, you probably could actually, and just say, look here, try it out yourself, but from a commercial point of view, probably sort of 46%, maybe 50%, because it has flattened the oak a bit. I'm getting more spirit character, but again, it's young spirit, but it's got a nice juiciness. Again, I'm picking up the sort of the apricot and the barley and the sweetness of the spirit. Let's see what that's like now. Again, lighter, less oak dominated, a lot more spirit now, but I'm getting a lovely cinnamon spice and pepper. It tastes a lot better balanced with a drop of water, it has to be said. But I think, seriously, I think I would give that a little bit more time, but you know, nice. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Re-Charred American Oak Cask. So this is 51.9, and like I said, this is the first one that's been of these that has actually been released. I'm assuming that these will all be released at some stage. I think the RRP is 65 quid, which, yes, is a bit expensive for a young whisky, I will give you that. But it's about par for the course these days for you know, this sort of thing. I'd like to see it a little bit cheaper, because then you're going to get it to more people, but, you know, it's not like it's well, it is expensive, but it's not horrendously expensive. Anyway, let's just see what it's like, shall we? Well, you know, that I can see why they bottled this one. It does seem quite forward. Musky rose petal notes. It's got a quite a wininess as well, with ginger, vanilla, apricot. Yes, it's quite heavy on the oak, but not as heavy as the previous one, the ex-Bourbon. It's got a little bit more of a lightness to it, and maybe that's because the re-charring has kind of, you know, allowed the oak to, or not necessarily, to act more like a filter than add gubbins of vanillins. Either way, I can see why this one has been chosen to be bottled. Let's see what the pal's like. Really spicy, a little bit of charring oak. It's got quite a wininess. I mean, although it's Re-Charred American oak, I'm getting an almost winey red fruit kind of character, which is a bit odd. Maybe this isn't a Re-Charred American oak cask, maybe it's a Re-Charred wine cask, I don't know. All it says on the thing is Re-Charred cask. Maybe this isn't the Re-Charred American oak, maybe this is, I don't know. But anyway, lovely spiciness, nice level of oak. If this is indeed what they have actually bottled, then I can, like I said, I can see exactly why this has been bottled. Let's put a little drop of water and see what happens to it when we do that. Don't think it really does water particularly well, actually. It's a bit kind of nondescript. It's a bit sort of oaky. It's a bit, I wouldn't quite say muted, but it lacks that sort of, you know, technical term there, laxy, yeah, it's all gone a bit simplistic and a bit kind of like, yeah. Nice amount of spice though. Let's see what the palate's like now. Again, it's kind of emphasised the sort of charring of the oak. I'm getting a lot of charred oak now and less fruit, and I don't think this is doing water particularly well. So if you do buy a bottle of this, then by all means experiment with a drop of water, see what you think. You may well like it with a little drop of water. It certainly sort of softens it a little bit, but I think it kind of like detracts from the intensity, and it becomes a little bit simplistic, but still, you know, really good spirit. Okay, so let's move on to the Virgin American Oak. Oh, look at the colour of that. I mean, wow, you know, 2 years and that colour. I mean, you know, well, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, you know, how many Bourbons get bottled at 2 years of age and have this kind of colour? Anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. Punchy, weighty, fruity. Oh, gee, that's really brought out that kind of estery, pineapple-y, apricot-y kind of fruit. That really has brought it out. Oh, that is good. I mean, from a nasal point of view, I would have bottled this one before the charred oak, but I can see why they've done that. I mean, this isn't exactly subtle, it has to be said, but oh, sure, it's a beautiful nose, really, really nice. Even I'm getting a little bit of almost heathery smoke, which is obviously you know, a wood element rather than obviously being peated, because it isn't peated. But do you know what? I really like this. This is really ticking all my boxes, and like I said, I would have, if it was me, I'd have released this one over the Re-Charred cask. But then I'm not running the distillery, am I? Let's see what the palate's like. Damn, that is gorgeous. I mean, that is really nice. So again, it's very oaky. I'm getting a lot of exuberant vanillins and spice and a little bit of pepper, but I'm also getting apricot, I'm getting creamy tannins, I'm getting nuts, I'm getting marzipan, or very subtle marzipan, wood spice. Oh, yeah, that's got a lovely length. It's got a vibrancy to the finish as well. Okay, yes, you can argue that's probably a little heavy on the oak, but I would argue it's not as heavy as the ex-Bourbon cask, and I'm quite surprised about that, because yes, it's got a spiciness which I would expect from virgin oak. It feels like virgin American oak. I can't remember whether yes, the virgin oak comes from Missouri in America. Yeah, it doesn't have the virgin European tight tannic kind of character. It has a softer tannin to it, and oh, that's really, really impressive. What was that bottled at? No, that's the Re-Charred one. 53.1, or currently 53.1. Oh yeah, that works really, really well. I'm really impressed with that. And like I said, I think I would have personally, well, we'll now see what water does to it, but I think personally, neat, I would have opted to bottle this one over the Re-Charred. A little sugary perhaps, but you know, it's still really fruity, it's estery, it's aromatic, it's just absolutely gorgeous. I hope that this is still like this when they do decide to actually bottle this, and I'm hoping that they bottle this one next, because I'll certainly have some of this, as they say. See what pass on. It's a bit short, it's a bit spicy, but I'll tell you what, I think it does water better than the Re-Charred cask. It's a little bitterness, but you know, it's not the sort of bitterness that sort of is out of shape. I think that kind of adds a nice kind of counterbalance to the fruitiness and the oakiness. And like I said, I really think that was probably the one that, if it was me, I would bottle that one. Right, okay, so let's move on to the ex-sherry cask again, 51.9%, batch number 1. Oh, that's a stinky nose. What the hell did... Oh, that's really vegetal, it has to be said. That really has kind of... I mean, there's no sort of... Oh, no softening at all there, it has to be said. I mean, it is kind of like so disconnected. It's kind of herbal spirit, herbal sherry, stinky, it's almost sulphury, which is kind of like, you know, I'm wondering why, when these casks have obviously been shipped with alcohol in, it's raw. It's kind of Jesus. It's like you sort of like smell this and you go, yeah, well, I'm going to leave this for about 10 years. Sauvage, I think, is the apt terminology for this particular bottling. And like I said, if this sees the light of day before about 10 years old, I will be absolutely amazed. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Oh, that's making my eyes water. Oh, and it's not because it's particularly alcoholic. It's kind of alcohol and vegetal tannins and sort of intense dried fruit and bitter tannins, and yeah, right. We're absolutely nowhere near sort of ready for bottling with this particular one. But it's a real intriguing, sort of interesting look at sort of how the sherry cask in the European oak is working differently to the American oak with the spirit. And is this because it's tighter tannins? Is it because it's the sherry? It's just sort of bittering, and who knows? I mean, and this is the thing with wood maturation. I don't think sort of anybody really knows. It's not an exact science at the end of the day, I'm sure, but I'm sure people have kind of studied it. But anyway, let's see what the nose gives us on this now, shall we? Still pretty herbal and verging on the sulphury. I wouldn't quite go as far as saying brimstone, but I'm quite surprised that I'm getting that. And maybe it's me. Maybe it's. I do pick up sulphur or that sort of sulphury compound really, really easily. So maybe I'm just kind of misinterpreting. But either way, that's absolutely nowhere near ready for bottling yet. Yeah, I mean, that's just absolutely all over the place. I mean, and it just reinforces what I thought from nosing it. So it just goes to show, and this is just a wonderful insight into how the spirit is reacting with the different types of casks. I mean, how many times you ever going to get this opportunity? Okay, so let's finish off with the peated finish. This is 54.2%. Oh, that's a nice nose. Quite heathery, and it really has drawn out the esters. It's got white licorice, pine needles, tar, quite toasty oak, but it's really rounded as well. I mean, again, I think after the ex-virgin oak cask, I think this would be the next one on the list to bottle, to be honest with you. It's got a touch of lemon and it's got a vibrancy, and it's not hugely peated. It's just background kind of peat, like I said, slightly heathery, herbally. That is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, I do like my peat monsters, as you know, but if you're going to do something that's kind of like a peated Highland or a peated Spey or something like that, please stop whacking up the peat levels. Let the balance work. Gentle peat, and that is just, that is lovely. See what the puzzle are. Heathery peat, licorice, barley, lovely rich fruit. Balance is just absolutely gorgeous. It's spot on. It's not overly peated. It's got a lovely peat length to it. Touch of tar, pepper, a little bit of charred oak. It's just absolutely divine. That really is lovely. That works absolutely wonderfully, and it just goes to show that at the end of the day, you can. The end product is what really counts. Does it really matter how you get there? Does it matter whether it's the barley is peated or whether you put it in peated casks? What really matters is, damn, that's gorgeous. Dusty, sooty kind of aftertaste. And again, it always amazes me how much peat character that a spirit picks up from the cask. Absolutely amazing. Right, okay, so let's see what it's like with a little bit of water. To be honest with you, not a huge amount of difference. The peat is maybe a little bit sweeter. There's a little soapiness to the spirit character, but I kind of quite like that. And like I said, I think this would certainly lend itself to being the second bottling that the distillery does. Let's see what the nose palate's like. Still quite peated, softer, more chocolatey barley. And like I said, I think that's got a really nice character to it. And like I said, I think that would certainly lend itself to being bottled earlier than, for example, the sherry, the ex-sherry bottling. So, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Firstly, a big thank you to the Bimber Distillery for the samples for today's episode of the show. I really think this is an interesting, intriguing insight into the character of the spirit and where it's at this present moment in time. And and the distillery are allowing you to have a look at that. And it's the sort of thing that most distilleries are not keen on doing so, because they want you to taste the finished item, and can't argue with that, I suppose. But it's always lovely to see the sort of like the work in progress, and the New Make spirit is obviously setting out the stall of the distillery, how it's going to sort of mature and relatively quickly, unless you put it into an ex-sherry cask, of course, and it just kind of like gives you an insight into the character of the whiskey. The ex-Bourbon, it's kind of going to need some time, pretty much like all of them, with the exception, I think, of the virgin oak cask, which I would have bottled first. Yes, the distillery opted to sort of go with the Re-Charred cask first, and I can see why. It is certainly approachable. I would personally say that when you put a little drop of water with it, it doesn't quite do it so much justice as the ex-virgin oak, but then I guess it's all down to the. I don't know who selects the cask. I don't know whether it's Darius himself of the unpronounceable Polish surname that selects the cask. Maybe it is, and I'm guessing that he decided that one was probably the one that he wanted to sort of bottle first and portray the distillery as opposed to the American oak. So at the end of the day, I can go through each individual one, but it's a really intriguing look at sort of you know, where a distillery is at this moment in time. And yeah, I love the peated one. Like I said, I think that was the one that I would opt to go for next. Bottle the virgin oak, then the peated, and then, you know, see how the other ones have kind of developed after that kind of length of time. And you know, there's because they've started down the route of the vodka and the flavoured vodkas. There's no huge pressure per se to sort of, you know, bottle the whiskey right here and now. So I would say that they're obviously taking the long-term view and deciding when is the right time to bottle each of these particular bottlings. And like I said, I think by releasing this kind of miniature set, you kind of get a lovely insight into, you know, where the distillery is at this moment in time. So really intriguing. And I think if you're into your whiskey, and I don't just mean into it in a sort of like, you know, I like to drink this bottling or I like to drink that bottling, but into it in a sort of, you know, I really want to get under the skin of this particular whiskey, I want to understand what they're doing, then this little gift set is, yeah, absolutely spot on. So there you go. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I've just grabbed a random bottle, yeah. Good drumming, and good afternoon.